I'm not making very good words right now. I've got a sore tonsil. I went to the doctor about it yesterday and she acted like I was making it up. And she swabbed my throat for strep. And then she lost my swab, so I had to come back and swab it again, and I haven't heard from her since. I'm pretty sure that it was a fake doctor's office and the doctor was drunk. What's up, guys? Welcome back. So today we are going to be comparing a bunch of my eyeshadow palettes. I have a pretty large, extensive collection, and I have this thing where I will be drifting off to sleep at night and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, those two palettes are really similar. And then I have to go swatch it and figure it out if I'm right. And I was right in a lot of cases for these, and I think that it is a valuable thing to share because I would argue that you don't need both. And I will help you decide between the two if you have been kind of going between the two on any of these. And or you might have been ogling one palette and not realize that you already own the palette that is very much like it. So we're going to be doing a lot of swatching today. I'm going to demonstrate why. I'm going to make the case to you why I think that these are as similar of color stories as they are. This is in no way saying one palette is good and one palette is bad. They're different. None of them is like a dupe for the other one. That's not my point, but they are super similar and very similar color stories. And I'm hoping that this could be helpful to you if you are trying to decide. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, so first, and this is kind of a layup because we've talked about this before, but I just got to get it out of my head, you know? We have 3 palettes in this case, and they go in order because this was the first one that I owned. This is the Natasha Denona Safari palette, and it is all matte, and it is very, very beautiful. We have talked about this at length. I've talked myself blue in the face about how I don't love the Natasha Denona matte eyeshadow formula. I think it's difficult to use. These are very, very pretty shades, but I am going to be decluttering this and passing this on to somebody else after I do this video. That is also because I own 2 other palettes that are very, very similar in color story. The second one, and this was one that like woke me up in the middle of the night and I literally texted Tyla. I was like, wait a second. You've made a vegan version of the Safari palette, and that's not 100% true. These are a little bit different. The Safari palette does have some kind of unique shades in there. It's got that kind of mint green, and it's got a couple more pink variants in there of that like kind of beigey, pinky situation. But there are so many shades in this palette, and I would argue they're kind of the showstopper shades that sell the palette, you know? Those are all so similar, I don't even know which ones are which. 2 of them are from Safari and 2 of them are from the Joshua Tree palette. Did I say Joshua Tree? It's the Joshua Tree palette from Aether. Tamarind versus Desert Date. Those are gonna be really, really similar. Voodoo, and then whatever the shade is called on this one, extremely similar. So if you were ever looking at the Safari palette and you didn't want to buy it because A, it's not vegan, B, it's insanely expensive, it's $125, or C, you just are scared of a really professional formula like that and you want something that's going to be a little bit more fun to use, the Aether Joshua Tree palette is going to really hit the mark for you, and it is a lot more affordable. And Joshua Tree also contains this kind of interesting cornflower blue that is nowhere to be found in here, but they are, for the most part, extremely similar, and I prefer Joshua Tree for obvious reasons. Now, curveball, right? The next thing that I'm comparing this to, and again, it was sort of like a pathway that I went down because of the order that these were released in, another time I kind of woke up and was like, wait a second, this looks familiar. This is the Raw Beauty Kristi by Colourpop. New palette, what's it called? At Forest Sight. Again, not identical. This is not all matte. It does have 2 shimmers in it, and they, I would argue, are kind of the selling point of the palette. They are very, very pretty, and I feel like if you are wanting to lean more towards one or the other, I would choose between whether you want glitter or not, because these glitters are pretty fantastic. But a Colourpop palette, it's almost unfair to compare because they are always so inexpensive. I think this is like 20 bucks or something like that, but I still prefer this formula. I like a Colourpop eyeshadow, I do, but these behave, because Raw Beauty Kristi has fantastic skills, these behave very much like a pressed pigment, and they don't do the versatility and the blending on the skin, and honestly the wearability that these do. This looks like a crazy palette. It really does. It looks like it's a rainbow palette, but the neutral shades that I would be going towards with like a pop of something wild in this palette on a regular basis really kick the pants off of the neutrals in this palette. And I would argue that that's not what she was going for. So if you are looking for something that is a little bit more everyday, a little bit more wearable, and has more neutral shades for you to lean on, like I would argue even this one up here, it just makes an absolutely gorgeous like eyeliner shade. This is going to just be a little bit more of a true rainbow palette to me. Yes, they're muted. Yes, they are wearable. Yes, they are a little bit more in like that, you know, foresty, slightly leaning cool. They all have a little bit more depth to them than like a pure rainbow palette, but these are not backing away. They are color, 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 and they don't have the tans and the browns and the creams to help you kind of back your way out of the jungle. So, or the forest in this case, I would say. And I'm gonna go ahead and swatch those two glitters because they could be the thing that makes the difference for you. So we have the most unbelievable, this shade Evergreen is, it's bonkers, guys. It is tan shift green. And so it looks green in the pan, but it is truly a taupe that just has a shift of green in the glitter. And then West Coast, it's just a money shade. It is just such an unbelievably beautiful, like orange gold. And it really, really goes with the palette because Chanterelle and West Coast just go super, super well together. But if you are looking for something that is more wearable, it is going to have a little bit more of the back you out of trouble shades, I would go for this one. If you are really just here for the glitters and here for the loud, this one's gonna be the glitters and the loud. I love that color story. Oh, it's so pretty. Ooh, no wonder I've bought it 3 times. All right, next. And follow me down the primrose path here, guys. So I, at one point, compared the PYT No BS palette in all of its cool glory that I love so much to the Charlotte Tilbury Exaggerize little $53 situation here, her quad. But on closer inspection, I found that those shades actually don't compare one-to-one quite as well. What it does compare one-to-one with shockingly well is the Wayne Goss palette. Okay, and he has 2 now, but this is the original one, the Luxury Eye palette in Imperial Topaz. $55, $53. I mean, do you see what I see? Like, so let's go ahead and swatch these next to each other real quick. Oh my gosh. Okay, so in this case, the pattern is going to go Charlotte Tilbury and Wayne Goss, Charlotte Tilbury, Wayne Goss, etc. These are the 2 matte browns. This one's not really brown. It's more of kind of a lavender leaning brown. Nah, it's brown, but it's got a little more purple to it. But on the skin, I mean, I think that you can tell that the Wayne Goss one is definitely warmer, but they're very comparable. The 2 shimmer situations, the shimmer browns, again, the Charlotte Tilbury one is a little bit more nuanced. The whole thing just leans a little bit more pink, but they have the same finish, the same kind of consistency. And the 2 pearly shades, I definitely prefer this one. This one's actually a little bit too gold for me. And then those 2 glitters are super duper similar, except, well, not in the pan they're not, but on the skin they are. But I would definitely pick the Wayne Goss one. It's just creamier. It's so nice. It almost feels like the Hourglass Scattered Light, but it's a lot finer. It's like somewhere between Hourglass Scattered Light and like the Aether Beauty highlighter, or like the Fenty highlighters, if you are like familiar with that wet look. Okay, focus, stinker. Yeah, so that's the highlighter. Whereas the one in the Exaggerize palette, it's okay, but it's just a finer glitter. It's just a lot harder to get the payoff from it. And I found that to be kind of disappointing with that palette. In fact, I kind of regret buying that palette because while I deliberated so much over the different shades of all the different quads and which one I was going to choose, and this one looked the most appealing, it looked the most appealing to me because I already owned it, I think. And we do know that Wayne Goss is a big fan of Charlotte Tilbury. I'm not surprised that they end up kind of having the same, what would you call that, like a hive mind? Is that what I'm trying to say? I don't think that's what I'm trying to say. But those color stories are extremely, extremely similar. And I think that while Exaggerize, yes, does lean a little bit cooler, that would be, if you were deciding between the two, the selling point to me. If you just want something that leans a little bit more cool toned, absolutely go for the Exaggerize. But if what you're looking for is just kind of a neutrals palette and you don't mind it being a little bit warmer and the formulas to be creamier, I would go for the Wayne Goss. This though does have that issue that we talk about with Wayne Goss all the time where everything is extremely pigmented, and this is going to be a little less pigmented, a little easier to work with, but like the glitter is just so much creamier. And the amount of product, I don't even have to tell you that. The comparison on the amount of product, how precious she thinks her formulas are, is just crazy to me. He just gives you so much more product. So yes, for my own personal druthers, I would rather this palette have leaned just slightly cooler, just a little bit more neutral. It's a little bit too warm for my taste, and so I do like this. I don't think that you need both, and I think that if I had to choose, I would still choose Wayne Goss. All right, the next one is kind of interesting because one of them is discontinued, and that is the Aether Crystal Grid Gemstone Palette. Was this her first one? I think Rose Quartz was her first one, and then this one came out after it, and it is an all shimmer and satin formula. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful palette. It's not something that you can use just on its own, I don't really think, because I like to have a couple of mattes in there, but again, you can't get your hands on this anymore. So if you own this, cherish it, whatever. But if you don't own this and you wanted to, I realize that these are not exactly the same, but they're pretty actually similar in the idea that they're getting to. So this is the Stoned Vibes palette that came out from Urban Decay, and it's almost like instead of them all being shimmery, they separated the matte out and made the shimmers extra shimmery, and so they're these really weird like tri-chrome kind of glitter situations, whereas this one has always been a lot more wearable. But for whatever reason, like if you had your eye on this, this might be able to scratch the itch. All right, ignore this situation. I got a little confused. I got my wires crossed. Something that both of these palettes have in common is that they look very different in the pan than they do on the skin, and so like I don't know what I'm swatching until I've swatched it. I'm like, oh, because they have like funky shifts to them. Like this Bloodstone shade is like green in the pan and then it's tan on the skin. It's really strange. But aside from all the rest of them, I accidentally switched these two up. But like this is the Icy shade from the Aether palette, and then this is the Icy shade from the Urban Decay palette, and then we go Urban Decay, Aether, Urban Decay, Aether. So the easy thing to see here is how the Urban Decay palette, their formula is just way more metallic. And so that's how you would decide whether this was for you or not. But they have a very similar whole idea to them, I feel like, in the sense that, you know, if you are somebody who, these are the colors, I mean, obviously, if these are the colors that you want to wear on an everyday basis, but you like being excited by eyeshadow, these are both really beautiful for people who like getting excited about eyeshadow and like to work in more saturated values. You know, if you want something that really glows on your inner corner, a pearl is nice, but an ice blue is even better, you know? And these both have really beautiful ice blues in them and really gorgeous, like deep, rich, like burgundy shimmer shades and everything. And again, it's hard to even talk about this because you can't get Crystal Grid anymore, but this is an incredibly satisfying palette. You know when you look at this if this is your thing. And if this is your thing, it's a very good job at what it was going for. And I also absolutely love that they include the 4 matte shades so that you can back yourself out of trouble and so that you can make an eye look around these things. I feel like that was kind of the one drawback to Crystal Grid that I didn't reach for it that often, was that I couldn't use it on its own. This is, while a little bit more out there in terms of the foiliness of the shadows, a more all-in-one palette. Oh no, now I'm really covered in glitter. It is my new skin tone. Okay, so next we have the warm fall tone, gem tone, foily vibe of it all. And that is contained within the Aether Beauty Solstice palette and the PYT Warm palette. They are both so utterly beautiful, aren't they? Wow. So first of all, you're getting 8 shades here, you're getting 12 shades here. But PYT has always done a really good job to me of, you know, with that huge pan of like the thing that you're probably gonna use the most of sort of thing. But this is not necessarily for me in that sense, like that's not necessarily a back me out of trouble shade as much as the giant pan in the PYT Cool, the No BS palette is, because it's just it's kind of a deeper, rosier tone. So it's not like a highlight for me the way that the other one is, whereas this one does have a lot more options, but they do have a beautiful kind of richness to both of them, and they both have really, really great payoff to the shimmers. Okay, so there we have our warm toned color story between the two, and it goes Aether, PYT, Aether, PYT, Aether, PYT. So you can see that the colors are actually more like saturated and rich and dense, you know what I mean, in the Aether Beauty, versus the shimmers that are in the PYT are gonna be more glittery. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love the way that they both apply. They're very, very pretty. This is a very easy, like one and done kind of like glitter eye, whereas the other one is going to actually have a lot more spreadability. Like the Aether Beauty, like you can wear it really built up and beautiful, but you can also really spread it out on your eyes and get like a very daytime look out of it too. And I really do think that these shimmers, they wear shimmery and that's it. You know, you gotta really want that shimmer, and I do. I want it. It's very, very easy to wear, but it's kind of a one note full blast kind of look. And this one having 12 shades versus the 8 shades in that one, you're just gonna get a lot more options. She does include some really, really great neutrals over here, some highlight shades, and you can get a really beautiful, easy, what would you say, tame daytime look out of this, or you can get really, really beautiful, rich, like fall tones out of it. So it's just about kind of what you're going for, which one is gonna work for you, whether you want the option to spread a satin out and really play with a bunch of different tones in this family, or whether you're really straightforward and you're like, I know I want a shimmer all over my eye and I want a matching color in my crease and I just don't wanna think about it. That's the difference between the two, but they are both absolutely gorgeous. Oh. And I've done many looks with both. You can see how much love they both have gotten. All right, guys, and finally we have two that you would not necessarily think of as being super similar, but hear me out on this, guys. Hear me out. So we have the Rose Quartz palette from Aether Beauty, and we have the Paris Edit from Viseart. And I will go ahead straight out of the gate and tell you guys, I regret buying this palette. It is not what I thought it was going to be. I thought that I was gonna be able to get some really, really beautiful neutral eye looks out of it that were gonna give me like that lovely lavender that kind of tends to go pink on my skin, and it was gonna lead me towards this nice apricot shade, and that these tans were gonna be the thing that helped back me out of trouble. None of it really works together. These shades are very, very dissonant. They just don't agree. And like this blue is probably the most interesting shade in there, but there's nothing that goes with it. And so here, let me go ahead and swiggity swatch all these for you guys. Okay, so this is where we landed on the swatches. That's not all of them, but they both have 12 shades in them. And I would argue that Aether did a lot more with the 12 than did Viseart. Now, they do have really similar formulas. I didn't realize that until I was swatching them just now, but they have incredibly similar formulas, and I rave about the Aether formula. The Viseart formula is really, really beautiful, and I would love to try more from Viseart, but this palette ain't it. So the pattern here goes Viseart, Aether, Viseart, Aether. And so this is like the most exciting shade in the entire palette from Viseart. This like beautiful, like it's just a yummy shimmer, but it just doesn't agree. Again, it doesn't really have anywhere to go in the rest of the palette with it. And the thing about the Rose Quartz palette is that it does have some of these interesting like shifting shades in there. And so that is a little bit more of like a pink shift blue, for example, I believe. Yeah. And then, you know, this is more of like an apricot shift pink instead of just being a pure tone, but there are also some pure tones in there. But that blue that's in the Viseart palette, I actually much prefer this kind of like, I don't know, oil slick blue that is in the Aether palette, because it's almost like it only shifts blue. It's like a purpley brown shift blue. Yeah, I did those two backwards. So this one is Aether and this one is from the Viseart palette, and that Viseart purple is just, once you see it up against this like nice kind of neutral taupey purpley shade, it's not even really purple, but it definitely leans a little bit more lavender. It's just, this is such an easier shade to wear. This is just so much more tasteful, and the saturation is so beautiful. So yeah, when you're looking at these, you aren't necessarily thinking, oh, those are the exact same color story, but they are very, very similar. And I just think that the Rose Quartz gets there. It gets there more than the Viseart does. So out of the two, I would definitely recommend this one. I wasn't necessarily going to give a binary on all of these, but like I said, while I like the Viseart formula, just from the experience that I've had with this palette, I don't recommend this particular color story. So when you have an eyeshadow collection, palette collection especially, as large as I do, they're bound to repeat in terms of their color story at some point. I'm not in any way implying that anybody ripped anybody off, or that one is necessarily like the original and the other one is like an iteration on it or something like that. These are all intuitive color stories that anybody could have kind of come up with if they just liked the way that they looked together. So I'm not really surprised that there are ones that compare as well as they do, especially when we're talking about like neutrals and stuff. But I hope that comparing these did help you, like I said, if you were trying to kind of make a decision one way or the other, especially when it comes to things that are very similar in color story, but you don't necessarily know how they look on the skin, or the formula might be different, wondering whether the price is gonna make a difference. In the case of like the Charlotte Tilbury versus the Wayne Goss, you know, I would argue that $55 versus $53, if you're just talking about sheer volume of product, Wayne Goss just, you know, gets it far and away. But there are nuances to appreciate about all of them. So I hope that you guys found this valuable. If you have any additional questions, because I honestly wonder whether this sparked more questions than it answered, leave those in the comments below. I'll be happy to try and answer those for you guys. If you guys found this valuable, let me know. Give this video a thumbs up if you did. And if you want to keep hanging out with me on this channel, hit the button down below and subscribe. I would love it if you guys did. Thank you so much for watching and for hanging out with me today while I swatched my arm 10 times. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.